Hey gang, welcome back to another video at Joe Daddy's Garage. This video is going to be a continuation of, I guess, the last 3 videos that I've done where I was test fitting the 347 stroker engine into the Brooklyn Pony. And if you go back and look at those other videos, you can see the problems I had, and what I'm going to do to resolve those is part of this process and what this video is about. So if you're interested in these kind of videos, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notification, and we'll go on from there, and let me show you what I'm talking about. Like I said, in the previous videos I was doing some test fitting, and I had assembled this 351 Windsor to this AOD transmission, or transmission case, and I test fit those into the car to see what kind of clearance issues I would have with the transmission. That was my primary concern. So that kind of revealed some problems that I was going to have, and a lot of viewers had suggested that the 351 Windsor is not a great mock-up engine, even though the dimensions are basically the same. The oil pans are different. So I decided to pull the 347 stroker engine out of the crate that it was in and test fit it. So that was the last video that I did, and the conflict that I ran into was the oil pan. And I showed this in the other videos, or the previous video, that the oil pan is conflicting with the TCI cross member. It was pointed out that this is more of a performance oil pan from viewers, like it's made for dirt track racing or something like that. And I've talked with the owner, and the decision has been made to just modify the cross member. Being that it is a very solid and thick cross member, there should be no issue with modifying the shape of it just slightly. The motor mounts or engine mounts are sitting a little bit high right now. That's because I can't go down any lower with the cross member and the oil pan interference with each other. So what I'm going to do is I'll put some marks on the cross member where it overlaps the oil pan. Whoops, there we go. I don't know how good the lighting is down there. So that's the overlap. So I'm going to mark that with a Sharpie, and then pull the engine back out and trim that cross member down so that I can do some more test fitting. I'm not just going to weld in a piece and be done with it. I'm going to have to test fit this a couple times to make sure that it's going to clear. So that'll be the next step. So basically all I really need to have is a vertical line where the oil pan interacts with the cross member. So just taking a simple Sharpie, I'll put a mark on it, and that gives me a reference point so that when I pull the engine back out I can see where that overlap is and work from there. So with the engine out, I can show you again, if you haven't seen it before, the shape of the pan. It's got a notch on this side and no notch on this side for whatever reason, I don't know. But if I come back down here and I show you the cross member, there is the overlap. So it's really only about an inch. And what I will do is cut probably 1.25 inches, maybe 1.5 inches at the most, and just widen that notch. So you can see it already has a taper to it. But that's the goal at this point, is to start with that corner and just make it wider. So I think what I'm going to do is break this down into pieces. I don't want to necessarily remove this entire corner per se, so I don't want to cut it back here. I want to leave this piece here, the square. So what I'll do is I will cut it down, cut through these welds, here and here. I know it's kind of hard to see, but I'm going to cut through the welds on the corner itself. And then what I think I'll do is I'll be able to bend this piece down and take this lower piece, one or the other, and join them together. I'll basically create two little doors and bring them together and then weld the door shut. Then all I have to do is make a little triangle and slide that over to this outer section. The only other thing I'm going to be concerned with, and before I get to that point of building all this, I want to cut this out, and then I'm going to set the engine back in and verify that it doesn't interact very much or at all with the back or the corner of this cross member. So I may have to notch it this way as well. I'm not sure yet, but there is that possibility. But I don't want to cut too much. I'll start small and work my way out. So obviously, you know, you're going to need hearing protection, safety glasses, and gloves to do this. And I'm also going to use the diamond wheel that I have from Bad Dog Tools. These are not cheap, but they come with a lifetime guarantee, and I've cut a good bit of stuff so far with this and I've had good luck, so I'm going to continue using this. Well, I had to make some changes. As I was cutting this and trying to film, the camera was just in the way. And it's very difficult to, have a high-speed tool running and try to keep it from hitting things or getting it bound. So I pulled the cameras out of the way and I finished making the bulk of my cuts. Now, the straight line cuts I did with that Bad Dog cutoff disc, that diamond disc, and then I broke out the plasma cutter because the angles, let's say at the bottom there, and then the triangular piece that was on the side, I could not get the disc in there to cut that. So using the plasma cutter, that was easier. And I know not everybody has a plasma cutter, but I have one, so I'm going to use it. So at this point, what I need to do is bend down that top flange. And this is going to be tricky because that stuff is 1/4 inch thick. That is some heavy duty material. So cutting this now, I realize I'm not going to have any issues. This stuff is really strong, so even extending this little notch is not going to hurt anything. Well, I'm making progress. I do have the engine sitting all the way in the car. There's no weight on the chains right now. It's just hanging there. And if you look down below, if I can get the angle right, okay, there's a bit of a gap. I know it's tight, but it's a little bit of a gap between the cross member and the oil pan. So the trimming I did helped relieve that contact. Now, the thing is, the way the engine is sitting right now, all the weight is on the back, so the bolt is actually supporting the weight of the engine. I can't say it's going to sit exactly like that. I still have to do a test fit with the transmission, so that'll come next, because I don't want to do any more. I haven't done any welding yet or anything on the cross member because I don't know for sure. So what I'll do is I'll get it back up on the lift and get the transmission case that I'm using. I'll trim down the lugs that I'd mentioned in the previous videos and test fit that thing and try to get it bolted in place, and that'll give me a more accurate example of the distance between the cross member and the oil pan. Well, at least it's a beautiful day outside and I can have the garage door open. I'm going to do a video on this car later just to tell you about it. It's not mine. But back to the Mustang. So I've got the car up on the lift, and I'm going to show you more on that in a little bit. But this transmission housing, I'm going to cut off these lugs. This one for sure. I'll probably do both of these just because I don't see any reason to keep them both. So those are going to go. And once I get those cut off, then I can test fit that housing to the engine and see what kind of clearance issues I'm going to have. So I'm going to cut that with my Bad Dog diamond wheel, see how that goes. I'm going to try something else. I think I'll try the old trusty Sawzall. See how that goes. Yeah, that was much faster. And I'm still going to knock this down a little bit more. When I get to do this on the other transmission, this will be really smooth. I'll make sure it's really not much there to, you know, be revealed. Let's say I'll blend that all in so it'll look nice. I'm going to cut this other lug off too. I don't see any reason to keep both of them there. This way. Well, I'm a little bit closer. I went ahead and set the housing in place, and I supported it with this simple post jack that I made, but I can't get the bolts started just yet. I've got one started, and there's a little bit of a gap at the top where the engine and the transmission meet. And what I found is, if I can get a shot at it, see if I can do this. Well, if you can see, hold on. Okay, so this is looking at the tail shaft, and if you'll notice, right there at the top is a little vent. And currently that vent is hitting the cross member built into the floor pan. And that's really the only thing that's stopping it from going all the way up and having the bolts go in. So I'm going to have to do something with that. Now, I have a couple of ideas. I don't want to remove that vent completely. So what I might do is enlarge the hole that is already there, and I can show you that later. There's a hole existing in that cross member, and I think I'll enlarge that hole so that there's clearance for that little vent cap to go all the way up. I don't know if I can get, yeah, you can't really see it. It's really tough to film this. That's the only thing that I really see slowing me down at this point. Now, I do know that the floor pan or the tranny tunnel is pretty close, and I just can't film it, you know. It's just pretty close up there at the top. Cutting those lugs off, that gave me the clearance on the sides, and you know, this one didn't have to come off on the passenger, on the driver's side, but it's out of the way, so I'm not going to worry about it. I've tried to get various things up in the top here. It's really close to the floor pan, so what may happen, or the tranny tunnel, what may happen, rather than cut anything, I may just use a hammer and massage that hump a little bit higher so that there's a little more clearance at the top of this transmission, because it has these ribs that run, and I know those are for strength, so I don't want to cut those off. I'm not going to cut those off. what I'll do is massage that tranny tunnel hump a little bit higher so that there's some clearance. Other than that, it looks like most everything's out of the way. I know that, you know, this post is close to the cross member that's built into the floor, but I don't think it's going to be an issue. And on this side, everything else is pretty close to out of the way. So I'm going to have to address that little vent cap at the top and also massage the floor pan. So we'll see how that goes. So I removed that transmission case, and I want to show you what my plan is. Here's where that hole is existing or pre-existing in that cross member. So I'm going to enlarge that hole, and I have to bring it towards the driver's side. That is just a rough drawing on it, just so I have a reference point. But I wanted to point something else out. With this floor pan having this weld-through primer all over it, you can see like that scuff mark right there. That's where that little bracket was sticking out on the side of the transmission. So it kind of gives you a witness mark to know where things are hitting. So looking at the rest of it, it's not too bad. I don't see really any conflict until I get up here. And that shows me where the top of that transmission was rubbing or hitting the tranny tunnel. So that's the part that I'm going to massage up, make some clearance. And you can see it already has wrinkles and stuff in it from when it was stamped, so it's not going to be that noticeable at all. And it really won't affect anything, you know, inside the car. So that's what I'm going to do, and we'll show you that once I do another test fit. Alright, I was concerned with how I was going to cut that hole without creating more, you know, damage to the floor pan or anything like that. So I remembered that I have this kit. This is the Bad Dog Biter that I bought at SEMA. And I'll show you how this works. But I've already done a little test, and it's going to cut this. And this is the biter set up on the end of my cordless drill. And basically, you know, I rotate or trigger the drill, and then the biter does its cut. And this is just basically a nibbler tool. So I'm going to try to do this and show it to you as best I can. I know it's a confined space, but if I take this tool and I can pivot the end of this, which is really cool. Get my position right. Yep, there it goes. Try not to block the camera as I do this. That's the hard part. Haha, that's doing a pretty decent job. So there's the hole I made, and I trimmed it up with what I call a rotary file. It's in the end of my air grinder. You know, it's like a little rotary burr, some people call them. So I did that to clean up the hole a little bit better. And now I just need to test fit the transmission housing again and see how that goes. And I'll probably knock up this area a little bit as well, just to make sure I have some clearance. I'll use a mallet for that and just gently massage it up. Okay, it's in again, and this time I'm able to get the transmission housing to mount up flush to the engine block. So cutting that little larger hole made a big difference in making this, you know, fit up to the block. Now I've also, as I said, I massaged up that center section of the tranny tunnel. That helped as well. I still have some issues though. I will show you if I can. Try to get the right angle here. If you see that lug sticking out there where the tailpiece bolts up to the main housing, that's really close to that cross member. And I did notice that I have a little bit of play yet in the bolts or the for the mount points on the engine, so I can move the engine slightly to slightly to the left or to the driver's side, and that's going to help, you know, hopefully with some of that clearance. If not, I'm going to have to modify that cross member so that there is clearance for that. And other than that, you know, it's tight. It's very close everywhere you look. It's hard to get a light in here and show you all that, but let me see if I can do a reverse. Yeah, I mean, it's really close. So, and part of that may be that this Dynacorn floor pan, you know, is not, well, maybe not exact to what came in the car originally. So, you know, you're gonna have to modify things. But I'm gonna show you one more area that's gonna be a concern, and that's up on top. Okay, you can see that the bell housing is flush to the transmission. Yes, I do know there's an 1/8 inch plate that's going to be a spacer between these, so that's going to affect the fore and aft a little bit on the transmission. But the bigger concern is getting these bolts in. Now, I mentioned before, you know, I wanted 2 1/4. I believe I said 2 1/4, and these bolts are 2 1/2. So even if I trim this down 1/4 of an inch, let me see if I can get a. I'm standing on a ladder, so it makes it a little more challenging to be able to do this, but if I hold this bolt back, the light's not really helping me there. If I, you know, let's say this bolt was in, that's not a problem, but getting it in is where it's going to be the problem, because even if I trim 1/4 inch off of that, there's no room. Now, I did have a suggestion from a gentleman in Australia who was doing a similar modification, and I believe he said they cut holes in the firewall just so they could put these bolts in. I don't see much other way to do it, honestly. You know, you could try to put the bolt in the hole and get it up in place, but even at that, it's still going to be hard, because it's you're going to be fighting with it the whole way in, because the firewall is going to be trying to push the transmission, or push the bolt forward, while you're trying to get the bolt or get the housing up in place. So I have a feeling I'm going to be making some holes in the firewall. But what I want to do at this point is I'll take everything back out, reset the engine so it's more towards the driver's side, and try to get it to stay in that location, and then I'll refit everything again to see how it looks. Just so you know, this is not just a pop it in and you're done type of situation, especially dealing with, you know, aftermarket panels and different stuff like that. So just be prepared. Alright, so it's back in again, and I think I have everything cleared. If you look at the pan drop here, this distance, it's about 3/8 of an inch, and that's going to be plenty, because there's no way that pan is going to move fore and aft. The bell housing appears to be clearing just about everything now. It's still tight, but it does have clearance. That little vent that I talked about, that's up inside the top of the cross member there, it's clearing. And from the rear, if I can get the camera set, it looks like the transmission's centered up the way it should be. It's still a little bit close on that one lug right there, but it's not, you know, it's got a 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch roughly distance, and then everything else, the bell housing, like I said, it appears to be clearing. Now, the big question that comes to mind is engine angle, and I should point this out too while I'm here. I do have the engine centered on the cross member, or centered on the mounts. So that's where it's going to go when all is done. But like I said, the big question is, what is the angle? So let me get my phone out, and I want to show you what that angle is, because everybody wants to know, right? So here, I'm going to put my phone up against the bottom of the frame rail. 0. That's a good sign. I'm not going to go all over the place and check that, because that's one point of reference, and I think it's fine. Well, here's another. Rocker panel, 1 degree, or 0. It's at 0. And then if I come all the way to the top, and you want to know what the engine is sitting at, well, 0. So, as I like to say, I'm happy with that. I think that clarifies some things and answers some questions. I still have the issue with the bolt gap between the firewall and the bell housing, and I'm pretty sure I'm just going to drill some holes, or make some holes, and then put plugs in, because there's not really any alternative. We've done some measuring, and even with a shorter bolt, you'll only end up with about 1 to 1.5 threads turning into the back of the block. That's not good enough. It's got to be 3 to 4 at least. So I'm just going to have to make some holes in the firewall, and we'll put some plugs in it. There's really no alternative at this point. And I'm going to do some more test fitting. We're going to try to set the headers in and see how they clear, and we'll let you know how that looks. Let's see how this goes. I have my assistant Roger with me today.
Hey everybody.
So you want to go up on there? We'll see if we can't feed these up through. Nah. See,
Not really.
nope. Here, you want to try down through?
Sure.
I only see one point of contact, and that's on the bell housing where the starter bolts up.
Yep.
Otherwise, it's clear. So you think you're it looks like you're flat.
It's flat. I'm not sure if fore and aft.
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
I think so.
Oh, let me give it to you that way. Now, of course, the steering bar is not in at this point. Are you on the ports, or you got to come back further?
Right there.
All right, so we had some interference with the header and the steering bar that connects the steering column to the Borgeson box. So what I want to do is try to show that, because you need to know, everybody needs to know that sometimes things just don't fit. So the bar is still in there for the moment. I'll just pull that all the way out so that we can get the header in place. We'll try this, see if it works. Go ahead, Raj. So without the bar, we can get the header pretty much right on the money, and it looks like it's going to clear everything that it should, right? You look good up there, Raj?
Yep.
All right, so if I put the bar in, and I don't know if I get my angle right on the camera or not, but We're hoping it does. I can't even, the header has to go in and basically up, and then we can get the bar in. So that's not good. And even then I'm having trouble getting the bar in. There, whoops. So as it is, how high is the header now?
About a 1/2 inch.
So about a 1/2 inch. So I don't know if I have this angle good enough to show everybody, but this isn't going to work. And I don't know what the fix is just yet. I've heard people tell me to put in a second U-joint, that they've done this. So that may be what we do. I don't think, putting a dent in the header is the answer, because it's got to be a big dent if you're going to do that. And even at that, it's going to get close to the secondary tube. Let me see if I can reposition this just a little bit. I can't see the camera specifically, but it's hitting this tube, and then you got this one that's very close. So sorry for the bad angles, but I'm trying. Yeah, so something's got to be fixed. And also in doing this, it's pushing the back of the header into the transmission. So we know that's just not going to work. No matter what we do, it's not going to work. So we'll take this back out. All right, you got the header? Yep. Okay. I did want to point out that this lug right here is what the passenger side header was hitting. So there's a difference between this bell housing and the transmission I'm going to use. If you look where this lug is right here, and you see how far this is sticking out, I'll show the other transmission so you can see the comparison, but this won't be a problem on the other one. So there you can see it doesn't have that lug sticking out. So you've got that top little square lug, and then the other one that's on the side of the case that I'm using doesn't exist on this one. This one does have another piece sticking out though. I'm not sure what that big post is for. I don't think it's going to be an issue, but I'm just pointing it out that it's there. Otherwise, everything else looks the same. I already pointed out that the tail cone is 1 inch shorter on this transmission, but everything else appears to be the same. So, harumph. That's my word for right now. Harumph. Yep. I'm a little bit frustrated. And I try not to get frustrated. I try not to take a negative angle on things. But sometimes, things just get out of your control, and harumph. This kit came to me as a TCI setup. This, the subframe or the frame rails, all the suspension, all that stuff. And the headers are supposed to be part of this kit. They've got TCI stickers all over them. They've got part numbers. Everything says TCI. So I don't understand how, if I'm installing their products according to their manual, their design, and all that sort of thing, that I'm having interference problems with headers. I figured out the engine and transmission. I'm happy with that. It's been a bit of a frustration taking this up and down several times, and I had to modify the cross member, and that was my choice. I know others have suggested put a different pan on it, and that's one option, but the choice was made to cut the cross member, and I'm okay with that. It's fine. But again, you try to put things together according to their instructions, parts they send you, and they don't fit. I showed it. You cannot put that header on and have the steering arm coming from the steering column down to the rack and pinion setup. Why? Why is that? TCI, I want an answer. I want to know why your product doesn't work together like you say it should. If anybody has any input on that, what kind of headers did you use if you put this kit together? I'm open to suggestions. The the idea of putting a big dent in a header so you can clear the steering rod, I'm not a fan of that. I really don't want to do that. And, you know, what else do I do? Now, I've already said, you know, I looked at the bolts on the Firewall, and I understand, you know, that we're not putting in the original transmission, so we have to make adjustments and modifications. That's fine, and I've done that. And I'm, you know, like I said, I'm going to drill holes or put holes in that Firewall because there really is no alternative. You cannot get a bolt that's short enough to fit, but long enough to hold the bell housing together like it should. So I've talked to other people, and that's what they did as well. They just put a hole in it, put a plug in it, sealed it up. That's just how it is. So if you have any insight, if you have any thoughts or ideas or anything that may help with this process, by all means, leave a comment. I'm not looking for comments about the oil pan or cross member. That's already been done and decided, and there's nothing I can do. At this point, it's done. All I have to do is finish welding it together and making a few little, you know, filler pieces, and it's done. So that is irrelevant at this point. I want to resolve the header issue, and again, any insight or thoughts on the bolts for the bell housing. Now, I did consider, and I changed my mind. I did consider the idea of shortening up the lugs on the bell housing, but I'm not comfortable with that. I think that's between the two choices. I'd rather make a hole in the Firewall and put a plug in it because it's not going to come apart. You know, it's not something that's going to fail or cause a crack in the bell housing. So I'm not going to do that. But anyway, again, try not to be too down on this, but sometimes, you know, things just don't go the way you want them to, and even you try different things and it just doesn't happen. So anyway, that's enough for my rant, I guess. I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank you for subscribing and being here and watching all these videos. I know that you want to see more, and I'm trying to get more together for you, and there will be more to come, I promise. If you would, throw a thumbs up on there, leave a comment, share the video, and, you know, keep watching. There's plenty more to see, and life will go on even though we're going through all this trouble with this coronavirus at this point. So by all means, wash your hands, take care of yourselves. See ya. I just couldn't get the angles that I needed, you know, the angles or the cut, you know. And there it is. So the plan is I'm going to try to cut this again. Whoops. Hold on. Let's see if I can get a better angle. The floor pan or the tranny. Before I even open it, nope. Where it meets the floor pan, or where the